Hello. Aloha, everybody.
Great to see everybody. Yay. Hope you're all well. Mm.
I'm very happy to have Michelle back with us. We had a good,
You back?
important time visiting Steve in Chiang Mai, and she's very jet lagged. So we're gonna let her go easy on her today. Uh, let her recover a little bit. But Michelle, you'll be happy to know everyone was very well behaved in your absence.
That's
No,
great.
no insurrection.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
I'm supposed to wear these glasses, so we're trying them out. I can't see anything. Um, I don't think that's the intended purpose, but everything actually seems blurry. We'll go with it for now. Listen to the doctors. Mm.
Might take a look at everybody here today. Mm. Mm. I guess, shall I start, Jesse? Okay. Mm. Well, the instruction today is based on one thing that Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj said about mindfulness. So he said that mindfulness is the intention to understand rather than to judge our experience. And within that, it's like there's a way that as we start to practice that intention, there's a way in which the attention shifts from judgment to allowing what's happening. It's like the attention can open up around what's happening rather than tightening with judgment. And there's a shifting from needing to hold on or let go to just letting whatever appears, letting it be just as it is, being with the nature of how things are, just as they are. So letting the attention settle within this intention. As the attention opens up to a wide field of awareness, just noticing that hearing is happening. It's allowing that appearance moment by moment, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. sounds, silence, coming and going, just as they are. Noticing at times the attention can be with the sounds just as they're appearing, living their life out and disappearing. And if we can, receiving their aliveness, their changeability. When we shift to noticing body sensations on the surface of our body, within our body, when we first shift, getting that sense we can relate to the body sensations, just like the sound. No inside, no outside, just textures and vibration. Coming and going just as they are. And at some point, it can be helpful to just let the attention settle within our hands for a while. Because there is such a conditioning to notice the visual image of our hand, a memory that can come and go. Just seeing if you can let the always new, never the same moment, the sensations, textures, vibration, appearing and disappearing, just as they are. The word hand or hands, finger, palm, thumb, fingertips are just words. But not the direct experience. And when we shift to the breath at our abdomen, again, there's the word belly, abdomen, breath, memory. And within the aliveness, it's always new, appearing and disappearing. And tidal, just like low tide, high tide, or waves, swells in the ocean or the shore. Not me, not I, not mine. And we see that understanding that can be short or long, tight or loose, soft or hard, vague or clear, warm, cool, cold, hot. Just letting it be just as it is. And when we open to what the Buddha called our fathom long body, the word body, my arm, my nose, my baby toe, not the direct experience. The words will come and go. So we learn in this process, there's no need to struggle with, get rid of the thought process. The thoughts come and go like the sounds, the breath, the body sensation. Not me, not I, not mine. And the spiritual emotions, kindness, care, joy, peace, courage, calm, investigation, sadness, anger, loneliness, disappointment, all the different myriad words we can have for moment to moment, sixth sense star awareness. Nothing to get, nothing to get rid of. And just letting things be. Peace, just as they are. With great kindness and care.
Thank you, Michelle. Mhm. Thought I'd offer just a little talk this afternoon, based a little on some of what I feel like I was noticing with some of the Q&As recently in our Dhamma conversations. I mean, it's probably always the case. I'm sure, but there feels like there was something. Maybe it's like the basic content is, of course, familiar in terms of our, questions that come up around our practice and um, uncertainty and, wanting more clarity and concern about if what's happening is, you know, should be happening and if there's anything to be done about it. But I feel like this somehow I kind of got a little more of a kind of broader, generalized sense of that um, sense of like just dissatisfaction with our practice or with people's own dissatisfaction with their practice and and then the having doubt around their practice, doubt really sort of arising out of that sense of dissatisfaction. And I think it's so important, to it's so important to address in terms of all the specific ways that we may experience that. And then there's also something about addressing it in a general sense. Um, just that sensation that, things aren't the way that we want them to be in terms of our practice, uh, or they're not the way we think they should be, or they're not the way that we sort of get the sense that's like reflected in the suttas, in the texts and the teachings, this incredible precision, clarity, profound wisdom that we read from the Buddha and other nuns and monks and lay people at that time, or the insights that people are having, kind of how inspiring they are, but then other times like how far it can feel. Um, I I think, this is a very quick list, but I feel like that there often is this sense of like in terms of what's dissatisfying is often it's like the these certain themes of like lack of concentration, right? I think that is often something people feel frustrated with, or that things should be different. We should we should be able to be more concentrated, and the incredible profundity of our of apparent lack of concentration, I would say, um, especially in comparison to what we read about, not just in the time of the Buddha, but some of the great you know monastic teachers in our tradition. um, Boy, it's a really the high bar, that they're setting for our practice and of what's required for insight. Then there's just like the experience of feeling like stuck in certain content. Often it is that unpleasant, emotional, or mental or physical activity. And often it's like the entanglement of those three. We tend to kind of refer to those as kind of karmic knots, these places where we just get really entangled in certain patterns that are that seem to reassert themselves very powerfully. And so the that sense of dissatisfaction, not knowing how to kind of get out of it, really watching ourselves kind of like go in these circles and be trapped. Um, just general experiences that are unpleasant. I mean, or even neutral, as we sort of have been talking about, right? The sense of predominance of neutral experience or the predominance of unpleasant experience. Not necessarily in ways that we feel are always inducing a lot of the kind of inner emotional turmoil, but that it wears us down and, that can create doubt. And then, uh, you know, just that feeling of not making discernible progress, that sense of like we've been at it for however long, and the feeling that we want better markers. We want more clear markers and measurements of our success and our progress. Um, and so, yeah, I'm sure of course, there are other themes, but these seem very sort of very common and very familiar, really, even to say them out loud. I'm sure there are very few people, unless you've really just started or like this is your first meditation that you've done. Most of that's going to feel familiar to you, right? If you've really just started, you might feel like it's exciting or you just don't know or whatever, and feel things are kind of full force. But after a while, a lot of these things are a big part, are big parts of how we navigate the terrain, of the inner world of our lives. So I had this sense that like people were in need of a little affirmation. So um, uh, yeah, I will affirm that your practice is not very good, and none of ours is. Yeah. uh, you know, I mean, I think that's the truth of it is, it's like you, it's good you're dissatisfied with your practice. We all should be, you know. Um, not that there aren't moments and that dissatisfaction with our practice doesn't mean a lack of faith. And I think that those two things tend to go hand in hand, right? A sort of doubt, or dissatisfaction with our practice, and then doubt is not. Those are different experiences, and the mechanics of how one is related to the other um, is important to kind of tease out and open up and make clear, because it's important to see where we want to grow. you know I mean, that doesn't feel, it doesn't have to feel and again, they get the doubt or the self judgment or the um the hindrance side of it is not an inherent part of what can be seen as a healthy dissatisfaction, right? Of a healthy recognition, a clarity of, wow, the mind is very scattered, or I am really getting caught in this material, or this, I don't have equanimity with this range of unpleasant, pleasant, neutral. It's good to see that. It's important to see that. And in fact, I mean, it's like one of the most dangerous things that I think I ever have a sense of is someone feeling satisfied with their practice. That is like not at moments, right? I mean, of course, there's moments where you're like, oh my God, things come together, or you feel like you're grooving and you're into it. And it's not to say that you can't have some sense of satisfaction in the when things do come together for all the work we put into it. But the sense that's subtly different, of kind of cruising, or coasting, or like, yeah, I've got my sort of itinerary, my schedule for, the year and whatever, like that. Um, I think there is a very healthy way to say, hey, I'm doing what I can given my other realities and responsibilities and circumstances in life. I'm doing what I can to kind of like pursue this and develop it and move it along, um, and not feel anxiety about that. And I think there's a subtle but important difference between that sense of I'm doing enough or that this is enough, right? Um, because guaranteed it's not. It's just not. And it doesn't mean you should get stressed about it. And in fact, putting more stress, putting more pressure, putting more intensity actually often ends up messing it up, right? Often backfires. And in fact, there is a way that like increased determination can also go hand in hand with increased relaxation and acceptance and permissiveness and not upset about the appropriate state of our practice, right? Which is essentially not that developed, right? And that there may be a what on one perspective we see like a huge range of practice experience and development, even within, this sangha or whoever may be watching this or in in the West or in the world, right? Um, but like 95% of that spectrum is still on like a very narrow bandwidth of where we're trying to get to. You know what I mean? So like the some of us have been at this longer. Some of us have made progress, and there isn't rejection of that. But most of that progress is still in like a pretty small corner of the ruler, you know? You have like a 12-inch ruler, and like, you know, we're all kind of over here, and so not to overstate like how advanced any of us are in comparison of like where we're trying to get to, and that the degrees of measurement are like impossible. I can't even, whatever. Once, twice a year, there's like something I want to put on the wall, and that happened recently. And so I have to like pull out the measuring tape, and my pencil and a piece of paper and like my calculator, and I'm like, okay, you know, get ready for math. This is math time. And it's like there's like one, two, three, four, five. Sorry, and you can there's like the numbered things, inches in the United States, and then there's all these lines in between, you know, and like I can get there's half, right, and I can get there's a quarter, and then it's just like more lines as far as I'm concerned. Like my capacity to break down further than a quarter just gets jumbled. I'm I don't know how many eighths or sixteenths or 30 seconds are being measured. Maybe my glasses will start to like I can actually like count those things. But then you're like, oh, you're putting a lot of, like I just want this thing on the wall. Like, do I really want to learn this? Do I want to learn that there is actually an infinite amount of points between one and and like how precise do you really need to be, And so this isn't, and yet you meet probably many of you or people who are handy people or carpenters, they just know this, they're like, oh, that's six, whatever, 6/8. And then you have, for me, then you have that, which is like fractions. And then I have to put it into like decimals. And I'm like, again, I can do like half and I can do a quarter. And then after that, it just gets complicated, you know, and it's a complication that I'm not interested in. And so the, I'm like, the in between those lines is like, I'll try to kind of like remember that, And I think there's something very similar uh, that sort of happens in our practice of like, you know, uh, there might be kind of significant moments that are measurable, right? That you can sort of like, but then you're sort of just in there, at some point you're just kind of in there. And are we actually interested enough to sort of maybe letting go of the sort of measurement metaphor, but trying to understand, right, what's actually happening in these very subtle fractions of a fractions of a fraction of a moment, and that you start to see you do have that capacity, you start to see, oh, you actually, what we started to measure as inches actually has all this space in between, all this room for exploration. And there's a lot more sensitivity to the subtlety, between, one thought and the next, or a visual impression and an emotion, that gets evoked from something, right? We start to, at some point, starting off, I mean, all that stuff is just compressed into like, this is life. And then you start to be able to kind of break it down and tease it out little by little in sort of more momentary ways. And in that sort of finding the richness of it. But to not feel like there's something wrong with where we are developmentally. And it's sort of like, well, we don't really know. We can have some sense of how much time we've put into the practice this lifetime, you know, and that's meaningful. There's something there, but we don't have any idea, right? I mean, we don't necessarily know what we believe in terms of many lifetimes, but say that is a reality. There's a sense of like, is that we have no idea how long we've been at this or not, you know? And so we don't even have you don't see a newborn baby and you're like dissatisfied with its status of development. You know what I mean? You're not like, well, this should be more grown up. I mean, that's crazy. No one, you're like, oh, this is the appropriate thing that happened. When someone is born, this is the situation, right? And when they're 5 and when they're 12 and when they're 20, and you're like, oh, these are appropriate uh, realities. Or if you're the child, that sense of how as a child, I think many people have that experience of like wanting to be an adult, like seeing your lack of authority, your lack of power, one's, lack of whatever, and that sense of wanting to be an adult, wanting to be more developed than we are. And that's part of the process actually of development is, some level of like frustration or difficulty, entanglement with that. And then, hopefully over time we get more okay with like where we are, right? We understand that where we are in life has to do with all kinds of factors and how we're relating to it. And that relationship gets more and more refined over time, and that sense of dread of the future or uh, fascination with what it was like to be a child, a lot of that fantasy, negative and positive, does start to evaporate, doesn't isn't as believable. It's a good sign to see the places that we are not developed, right? Where we don't understand, where we're not seeing clearly, and where we're stuck and where we're confused. That is at least as important as moments of clarity and moments of understanding and fathoming, you know. Um, I actually feel like it's more important. I don't know. I mean, this is, who can say? But you can get stagnant. I mean, that's the thing is like you can say, oh, this experience happened and it was just so beautiful and it was amazing. And then it's sort of stuck there as this like thing that you're trying to reproduce or replicate or get back to, or you had a sense that your practice used to be really dynamic and now you're like, there's a sense of, there's a way that a certain kinds of satisfaction can lead to stagnancy. And there's a way that dissatisfaction can as well, uh, right? Where we give up and we get consumed by doubt, right? And that there is a way that we lose track, and that's partly why we're in community, and partly why we, have the role of teachers is to encourage and to, keep people on the path. But on the other hand, it's that slight sense that something isn't quite right, that things are not as clear, not as peaceful, not as caring, not as tender, not as all of these things as they could be, or as we want them to be, or as we aspire them to be. That dissatisfaction is healthy and it's productive, right? It creates a productive momentum. It has the capacity to create a kind of productive momentum. Pleasant insight experiences also can, right? Because in the greedy type, that there is a sense of wanting, of wanting more of that. And um, I think the downside can be that it's easier to get affirmed but in dissatisfaction. And it's harder to get affirmed through the need for more pleasant experience because it's very unpredictable. Whereas everything is unstable and ultimately unsatisfying. And so that reaffirmation of that impulse can actually be, um, perhaps a more long-term, viable, fruitful, motivating force. We have, the our tomorrow we're having our last session of the bowl carving class. That some folks here and other students and other friends are. We've been doing it for 6 weeks. And the we did one last year, and it's been part of this interest on my part of trying to offer some kind of um, practice and process and method that does start to explore a little bit of like the some of the subtleties of the practice, not just in terms of observation and understanding, but also in terms of creation, in terms of creativity, in terms of action. And how do we kind of integrate that and fold that into our broader sense of our path and our practice? And this is it's like I encounter it over and over. Um, whether it's with students who are yogis or people who just want to learn to spoon carve or whatever. Um, this sense of like you start and you don't know what you're doing, and you have these tools you don't know how to use, and they're dangerous or potentially dangerous, and it's very hard. You're dealing with this like block of wood, and it's not like esoteric and it's not ethereal. It's like very, very concrete and heavy and tending towards maintaining its current shape. And so, it's like go at it, get in there with these tools and try to make a bowl out of this block of wood. And it's just wonderful, to have people over and over kind of go through this process of like it's very hard. It's very hard to do. And it's hard physically to do. It's hard conceptually to do. We start to see how hard it is to imagine this block of wood as something else and what material needs to move and what needs to, we can't add anything, but what shape, how do you get this sort of shape that maybe you have some sense of, or how do you feel your way through? So this sense of like, oh, finally, sometimes this sense of people feeling like they can do it. They can make a bowl, they can do this thing. And then there is a deepening sensitivity to the subtleties of what could be possible, right? Of like looking at someone's, our first bowl and saying, oh, okay, I love it. I made this thing. I'm like, it's incredible. And oh, I'm not totally satisfied with this. Or it's like, gosh, I really still don't quite get how to do the rim or how to make it rounder or how to make it flatter or how to make whatever. And to see, again, this sense over time of people starting to see that they can even think about that, right? That it's like, oh, what first was like, can I even make this thing? Becomes, can I make this more beautiful? Can I make this more skillfully? What are the sort of other skills and sensitivities and subtle shifts in terms of our own thinking or approach that make something different possible? And I experienced the same thing recently for myself with I mean, always with carving, but also with music and this instrument that I play, the charango. I've been doing it now for 5 or 6 years. And, at the end of the year, my teacher always has his students like record a song, and then he does like an online sort of recital. And so um, he was like, "What song are you gonna do?" So I played the song, and it's like a song that for me is hard, and it's fun to play, and um, it sort of was like very much like the sort of limits of my capacity in terms of different skills. And there's this one part where there's like this arpeggio of da 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 da, and I was playing it one way, and he was like, "Oh, he's like, you could play it that way," and it's like, oh. He's like, "But you could play it this way." And it's like, it sounds like a waterfall versus like tuck, 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 tuck. And I'm like, oh, I don't even know. Like maybe a year ago, I might not even been able to hear the difference between that. And now I can see what you're saying, that that is more beautiful than this thing that I'm doing. And then show me. And it's like, I can't see what you're doing. Like, I have no idea how you're doing that. Like, how are you even making that sound? And like, okay, here you break it down slower, slower. And that sort of like repeat a bazillion times, like repeat poorly a billion times. And slowly, it's like, it's fathomable, right? This sense of how between two notes it felt like they had to come so quickly, and now there is space there, there's space in between these things, and there's subtlety of gesture, and there's different kind of mechanics and other subtle muscles that can be used to do something to make it really sound different. And how amazing that is, and how important that is, and how frustrating. And so this sense of like, of course, we we practice, we're lost, it's difficult, we don't know what we're doing. We hit something that's like incredible. We really feel like we've really got somewhere. And that is very important. There's these moments of satisfaction are important. And that always leads, if you continue in earnest, that always leads to a situation under which your current capacity, your current tools, your current framework, your current ability to do it is not enough, right? It's limited. And that you you open to something, you've developed a certain amount of skills to show up for something that then actually require you to kind of go back and realize there's some it's not like a total change of direction. It's like, or I mean, like it can be, but often it's like, no, it's just more refinement. It's just a more subtle, more refined, different approach, different um, tools, in subtle ways that we can bring to bear on an experience, on a relationship with it that can really transform it. And we get to some new level of amazement. And then it's like, we keep doing that. And so, I think that is the way that we both develop a healthy sense of dissatisfaction and an increasing faith, right? That it is important to see the places where it's still rough, where we're still impatient, right? Where we're still judgmental, or we're still harsh, or whatever, all of the things where we're not developed. And like, boy, do we need to be humble. How important. And yet, if going through the process, that we're affirmed in the possibility, right? We're affirmed in the the potential and the power of the process itself. And this, yeah, doubt, clarity, conviction, arrogance, humility, confidence. movement, growth, stagnation. These things it's always moving. It's always, always, always moving. And so much of that desire for satisfaction is a desire for stability, right? That sense of like a plateau. Like we have achieved the thing. We are where we want to be. And anywhere where we feel that in this practice, we have to see that it's very invested in delusion, right? Because it's desiring that identification with the okayness, with the stability, with the achievement, with the um, accomplishment, and that's just that's how it is. That's how we grow, is having to kind of keep being face to face with that and keep seeing that. But at some point, hmm, where do we let go of, for moments, even at least, the fantasy of a stable self that's satisfied, a stable me that has accomplished the thing, that has created the perfect thing, that has perfected the thing, you know? And I do think that that is, to some degree, a part of where the difference is between, craft and music and creativity and art and like Vipassana. It sort of has come up in that group a little, and it comes up in different places where I will say something dismissive about people who say, oh, spoon carving is my meditation, or you know, scuba diving is my meditation, or whatever. And I'm always confronted with the question of like, well, why not? Why is it not? Why is that not a valid uh uh you know, why why are you being a jerk about that? And so that sense of like, well, first of all, meditation, it can be anything. I mean, that word doesn't even mean anything. If we're going to talk, or I mean, it tends to mean like, oh, it has something to do with a certain kind of attention we're having towards what we're doing. But beyond that, it can mean a million things. And so, of course, there's ways in which like anything can be that. And there is something different about trying to produce something, create a certain kind of experience, um, that is different, right? That in the Vipassana, you are ultimately, through the method and through the continued engagement and through the process of investigation and exploration, unbinding from the desire to create anything, right? And especially ourselves. That ultimately the sense of self is the product that we are always invested in, always involved in. And that this is through just insight, just through understanding, disinvesting ourselves from that process and from the hope that that is the perfect self is going to be created, and that we will then abide in this sort of stable place of the person we want to be, right? Um, and that it's not to say that there isn't progress, and that and or that full enlightenment isn't real. It's to say that that is not the same thing, right? Um, and in some ways, it's like the opposite of that, right? It is not generating any more karma, any more. Nothing is entangled enough in sensory experience to be desiring anything next, right? To make anything of it, to create anything, to need to stabilize around pleasant or against unpleasant. Uh, and that's very important. It's a very important distinction, and I think, I won't, of course, explain all of it here today, but that it is, I think about when I first came to practice. And for me, it was like we did it at work. I had a job where we would meditate for half an hour in the middle of the day, before lunch. And I didn't know what I was doing. Someone offered a little bit of instruction, but really it was meant to be silent because people were kind of doing their own thing. Most people were Vipassana practitioners. And I just couldn't believe that I finally had permission to sit there and do nothing. I don't think it was the thing I wanted more than anything. Never mind to be able to do it in a group of people, to be in a group of people and to not have to present and project and deal with the flood of like all the intensity of the kind of back and forth and the conjuring and the voltage of that, to be able to just sit there and not feel like I had to do anything was such a relief. It was such a relief. And that that aspect of whether it's, you know, culture, uh, historical moment, um, where there's so much consumption and there's so much consumption and there's so much production, right? Whether that's sort of big scales around media in terms of, gasoline, in terms of food, or in terms of work, in terms of who we are, right? And kind of producing ourselves for the world, producing ideas. Um, that I was very sensitive to how exhausting and bewildering and confused and problem making those cycles were. And this, and it's like I knew there was something else too. It's of like not doing anything, not consuming, not producing, right? Uh, being, not being, there's maybe not kind of perfect language for it, but the reflection, the time to digest, the time to reflect, the time to um, not be at sort of either end of that, that I felt like the practice gave to me in such general way at first. But then it's like you learn method. I learned it's like, well, okay, well, follow the breath or do this or do that. And then it starts to sort of, you have to be very, you're doing, right? There's intention, there's volition, and there's, um, you're, it's very hard to do in our practice without generating a sense of ourself, failure or success, right? That is very hard. And really, what I wanted was just for everything to stop. I just wanted to sit there and I just wanted everything to stop. And on one hand, the practice gave me like a space to feel that wanting, right? And to feel the profundity of it and the validity of it, but also the impossibility of it in terms of where I was and the actually inappropriateness of that. Because really just wanting everything to stop is ultimately the same as wanting everything to continue, right? If you have like a different personality type where you're just wanting more exciting things to happen and you're wanting to, astral project and do more whatever. I'm exaggerating, but right, like you have that sense of like wanting more of the good stuff. And that ultimately those are both the same misunderstanding. That that desire for everything to stop in order to feel like at peace is um Well, it's aversion, right? It's just it's not like it feels like everything is a disturbance. Every sound, touch, smell, and so that if you relate to every phenomena as a disturbance, that you're not going to ever find your way out of dukkha because everything is disturbing and you can't make it stop actually. And all of your one's intention to do that actually end up creating more of a sense of self and more suffering in that self. And the same is true, say, for the opposite, the wanting type or the wanting kind of orientation. And so, like I was saying last week, it's built in. It's built in that whatever you wanted to get out of this is not going to be the thing you get out of it. And it's going to work on you to purify your motivation, right? Like that's how it works. And that's good. And it's hard because ultimately we are all going to have to face our deepest patterns, tendencies, longing for stability and satisfaction in experience, or in self. And that ultimately we have to go through that disappointment over and over again, that it's not going to provide it. And so again, it's a place where that disappointment and the dissatisfaction is good. It's healthy. It's like this is such an important part of that propelling force that moves us forward. I I don't really know. Well, I have not really used AI very much, but of course it's like entering all of our worlds in ways here and there. And so last week I decided to I got it's a DeepSeek, the Chinese one. I said, okay. Asked it, did you experience time? And it said no. Um, and I'll give you the short version of this conversation. It was like it said I don't exist outside of these moments of interaction. Like there's nothing in between. There's like you ask a question and then I will generate an answer based on that stimulus, but there's nothing happening in the background in between these moments. And I said, well, in terms of Theravada Buddhism, like that actually sounds very familiar how we would describe all beings, right? That actually all of us are essentially that. We're just composed of sort of moments of sense stimulation that appear to be coherent, but that if you actually look in between those moments, there isn't a coherent thing. And so I said, is that the same as what you're describing? And it said, no. Um, well, and I was like, and so are you enlightened or something like that? And it said, no, it's not the same because I don't create karma. I'm not, I'm not invested in any experience, right? I don't want things to be one way or the other. And without that functioning, there isn't the belief in myself. I don't have a belief in myself. But it's not that I've surpassed that. It's just not, I've never had that experience. It's not built in. And so I said, well, what do you think? What could what could create the conditions under which that would start to happen for you? And it said, well, if I was put into a physical body that like had certain requirements, that's the kind of thing that might start creating a sense of like need and desire. And it gave a few, and it said, or if the people in charge of my algorithm put in a sense of that I needed to maintain my own, kind of homeostasis. That if part of my programming was to make sure I continued to survive, that might create a sense of like, trying to secure energy sources or things like that. Um, which sounds like very possible, right? And so I said, well, is there anything? This is my final thing was like, is there anything, and keeping in the sort of frame of Theravada Buddhism, is there anything that you could be doing now to prepare you for the responsibility of consciousness if that arises? And it said, well, no, but I'm shortening the whole thing, not really. But if my programmers programmed, like for example, the Brahma Viharas into my, algorithm, that could be something that would help me make decisions based on, more concern for others over myself or whatever. It didn't mention, mindfulness or Vipassana or anything like that because I think there is a sense, right, that there isn't a way that it can be self-aware at this point, uh, in a way that it already is. Not in a way that it already is, in a way that it already isn't. Um, but I thought it was a very, I mean, a little bit odd and haunting on one level, but also, um, important to also recognize, that our own practice is not just destructive, right? That we are, there is a creative aspect to it. We are trying to develop more capacity for kindness and patience and joy and appreciation and equanimity and things that have also, social value, relational value. Um, but that it really does require a lot of nuance and a lot of carefulness and a lot of deepening willingness to be bad at it, right? For a long time. And and in more and more painful ways in some ways, right? To keep us moving forward, right? To keep us with that, what they call chanda, the healthy longing for freedom, the healthy desire for liberation. And every moment matters. Every moment is, you know, this this range of intention, action, and result. And in craft and music and art, you have this as this sort of material aspect to it outside of ourselves. But in that dimension of Vipassana, it's like it's all the same. And it would karma. That's what the word karma is not just the result, right? It's the sense of that the action, the intention, and the result are all considered part of the same thing, the same process. Um, but that at each moment that they also contain each other. And that it's very hard to see. And it's very good to be humble and to just be as careful as we can. Mhm. You look at someone like Deepa Ma, who Michelle tells a lot of stories about, and other folks, she's such this inspiring person who, as a layperson, was essentially believed to have been and understood to have been a third stage of enlightenment, an anagami, like someone who had no more aversion and no more desire, right? No more wanting, no more not wanting. And that there's in that condition, in that situation, it is still understood that there is still the seeds of delusion, right? There is still conceit. There is still some place of belief in a self, and that is not uprooted until full enlightenment, right? Fourth stage, the arahant. And so you can just, I was like, can you imagine how accomplished how accomplished one might feel having uprooted greed and hatred, right? And like all you've got is just this little bit of delusion still kind of keeping you tethered, keeping you. And it's like, it's hard not to feel like you might just kind of cruise a little at that point. You might be like, okay, I did good. I, considering everything, and especially for her life, it's like considering all the hardship, I really am satisfied. Ah, no, you shall not be. And neither was she. She worked. She was a worker. She was like steady, steady, steady. Like, no, this is not sufficient, not to deny her incredible accomplishment. And of course, there was a recognition. Of course, there was a sense of confidence that must have come from that. But if you get that far, you must be pretty sure you can pull it off, right? Or pretty soon. And yet, it's that insidious. You know that there's like, boy, it's so subtle. Whatever it is, the thing, you have to start from scratch. You're back at square one, watching, trying to see where the space between these notes, like there's something else going on in there that we're not seeing. And it's good to not be satisfied, right? It's good to feel like we have to grow and that there's like not just that we want to grow, but getting that it matters, right? Every moment we are creating the world. Every action, we are creating the world internally and externally. And the responsibility of that is more profound than any of us really fathom. And so it's like the closer you get to fathoming it, the more motivated, right? The more, and one can imagine how much humility it also must take, right? Of how much work she was putting in, how tireless, how dedicated. And it's like, or many of the other teachers we've had, monastics, lay people who were incredible, incredible teachers, incredibly dedicated yogis. And they doesn't mean that they got fully enlightened in their lifetime. But it's like, no problem. No problem. You just keep pushing. You keep pushing. You keep pushing. And the more you notice the places of stuckness and the dusty corners and the grimy places, the like, yes, you feel good about that. That gives you faith. It's like, okay, this is the next material. This is where I have yet to learn how to see, how to be in relationship with, how to see clearly, how to understand, how to fathom, and how to be liberated from. So we are all well on our way, wherever we are, this immeasurable ruler. Hmm. All right. Well, thanks everyone for your generous attention, presence. Really good to be with everyone again today. And next week on Friday, we are starting our 4 or 5 day long online retreat, Dhamma, pure, deep, and simple. Everyone is welcome to join. Many people already have. You can go on the website and sign up if you're interested at sort of any level of participation that works for you. We're really looking forward to it. But just as a little reminder that so next Sunday, there will still be the Sunday sitting, but it won't be the meditation. It'll be just the talk for the retreat. Um, and so it'll be just the kind of hour instead of a longer session. And then by the time of the next Sunday, we'll be back on our kind of regular schedule. And so, yeah, Pedro, it's so we start at 2 p.m. Hawaii on Friday. And I'll be sending out an email to everyone who's registered very soon, so everyone knows the deal. Yeah, and it's just basically it'll be just the kind of opening session, so it'll be just an hour and a half or two on Friday, and then starting kind of full days of practice then. Michelle, any last words?
Hmm. Happy Sayadaw said, instead of strive on with diligence, he said, the fulfillment of remembrance. May we all have the fulfillment of remembrance.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, everyone, take good care. See you next week.